Okay, so this is a really difficult topic to talk about, of course, because um, you never want to admit that you feel like an imposter. Um, I think, especially in societies in the West, we're constantly talking about, like, fake it until you make it, or, oh, you don't feel confident, it's all right, just pretend until you do. And this, it's a bit of a toxic culture that kind of forces you to say that you're good enough, even if you don't feel like you do. On the opposite side of that coin, of course, is Japan, where I was taught how to be a professional, where I went to acupuncture school, where I trained. And in Japan, yeah, like you never admit that you're good at something unless you are like freaking amazing at it. There was even one time in my study group, Yashinimichi, when one of my teachers, Harada Sensei, he had sponsored um, this Spanish practitioner to come in. I believe he was Spanish, and just observe our group. He was supposed to be a born healer, and he pretty much denounced everything that we did in our group and said that it was, for lack of a better word, he said it was trivial. And those are big statements. I mean, in any case, he just came off a little bit haughty. And anyway, so after the study group, we went out to lunch with him, and then he went on his way. And I asked all of the senior practitioners in my group, I was like, so what did you think about him? Because I thought he was kind of arrogant. And, just to be in that culture for so long, to have someone say like, oh, I'm amazing I was taken aback by it. And I was surprised that every single person in my study group that was above me was like, oh yeah, he's a horrible practitioner. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think so? And they're like, oh, well, because he was being boastful about his skills. And so in Japan, it's a very interesting cultural thing. I don't know if it exists in other countries. I'd love to know if it does, but you definitely downplay your skills, unless you are absolutely amazing. And if you upplay your skills, you better be able to live up to them. Like if you say you can cure cancer, you better cure cancer. Yeah, I mean, it's a different society. Um, so in any case, like getting back to me, I always grew up with a little bit less self esteem than my peers. I was very socially awkward. I often remember watching people, trying to learn how to interact with them by watching how they interacted with each other. So just a really socially awkward kid. And I think that really did lead into the fact that I developed an imposter syndrome later on. And I know that I have that because I often have this fear within myself that someone's going to see through the facade, that I'm not good enough to teach, or I'm not good enough to treat, despite the fact that my students get really great results, and I do get good results in my clinic. A lot of times I'll catch myself in my brain like telling myself, someone's going to see through you, someone's going to notice that you're not good enough. And it's, I've said a million times, like, I do not believe that I'm the best practitioner on the planet. I'm far, far from it. I have so much more to learn. Every time I study with my teachers, I'm like, oh my God, the road ahead is so far, like, and so long. Yeah, but, you know, one of the things I think the imposter syndrome has really taught me is how how to enjoy the road being so far and so long, and really enjoying the journey, enjoying the process along the journey towards the goal, and realizing that, who knows if I'll ever be able to overcome my imposter syndrome completely, but I really do think it's helped me to be a better acupuncturist, because it's taught me time and time again, first of all, to overcome my own personal barriers. I mean, it could the personal barriers that you set up for yourself in your own mind, and then you create, by creating your own life around you through your self talk is so powerful. And time and time again, I find myself, if I'm in that mindset of, oh, someone's going to see through you, you're not good enough, you're not good as them, I'm able to catch myself in that process and say, okay, you're not good enough yet, maybe. Or this is just silly. Let's have some positive self-talk. Let's just find a few things today that you did amazing and let's learn from them. Or for example, if I have a treatment outcome in clinic that I don't enjoy, obviously, like we can't always get the perfect outcomes in clinic. I mean, geez. Those are the points. I think, I did this interview with Erilyn Truitt recently. If you're interested, I'll link it somewhere up here in the description box below. And Erilyn was talking about the patient that he's learned the most from was a patient that, he did a back treatment on this patient. He did a treatment on this patient for back pain. And he did everything under the sun. He did tuina, he did bloodletting, he did moxibustion, like he did everything. And this patient got off the table and actually felt worse. And he was saying, and I'm paraphrasing, so excuse me, Erland, for if I misspeak, but he was saying that, I learned so much and that I still am learning from this patient because I continue to retell the story and relearn from that mistake. So oftentimes, like I find my students saying, like, I don't feel confident yet in the Japanese technique. And depending on, of course, the stage that they're at in learning. And for me, that's a point to super celebrate because I do think at that point they're starting to get a bit of that negative self-talk going on in their brain, whether it's imposter syndrome or not, I don't know. But, they get a bit of negative self-talk saying, well, what I've done in the past, almost always they say the same thing. What I've done in the past is no longer, it doesn't resonate anymore and it doesn't seem to work. But what I'm learning right now, I'm still learning how to implement and I'm in this weird in-between phase. And so what I often tell them is like, you should revel in the stage that you're at right now, because to be able to be in the stage where you understand that what you've done in the past, for example, the TCM point prescription, that never worked. It didn't work according to what it was supposed to work, and understanding that there's so much more that you could do, or maybe it did work, but you understand like, whoa, I could have done all of these other things in accordance with the client and where they're at the table. And, and then they're like, well, oh, geez, I just can't go back to the TCM point prescription. And I'm like, that's an entirely different place, because I think most people don't understand. They understand that something's not right with the TCM point prescription. And I mean, don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to dog TCM or say it's not effective. It is, to a degree. But what I'm saying is, at a certain point in your TCM education, I think almost all, if not all, students go, wait a minute, there seems like there's something missing here. I don't understand why it's all in my head. I don't understand why it's all theory-based. I don't understand why I'm not more palpatory. There's not more palpation on the patient's body. Why aren't we studying technique more? And then when you go into the workshops after you graduate, it's all like a PowerPoint lecture or a front room demonstration. And just saying like, one of my students today, Shanid, was saying that, up until this point, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And now I know what's wrong. The point prescription, I was just trying to follow a point prescription. I was going into all of these books and trying to figure out what all the books would tell me, but I could never find the answer. And the answer that she's now realized is there, but she hasn't mastered yet, is that she needs to touch the body. She needs to ask the body. She needs to work in accordance with the body. Also, definitely to hone in on one solid book of education. For example, right now I'm having my students work with the Shanghan Lun because I think it's a fabulous book of knowledge for acupuncture and for herbs, actually. So being at the level where TCM, you just use TCM point prescription, you don't know what's going on, but you kind of keep going along because that's all you've learned. And then being at that higher level of saying, okay, that didn't work. That level of knowledge and application was not actually working. And I know what's going to work, but I'm not there yet. That's an entirely different level to celebrate. So one of the things that I think the imposter syndrome actually helps me with, not that I'm saying you should develop an imposter syndrome, I'm not saying that at all. Please don't. It's not fun. It's not a good thing to have. But one of the things that I think it definitely helped me with is it never made me too big for my britches, which is a saying that kind of means I always was quite humble. Like, it forced me to be humble because I never felt like I was good enough anyway. And it made me consistently go back and relearn. Like, I could never know anything enough. In that way, I really do think it's helped my learning. It's kept me humble. It's kept me in a place where I do think I need to consistently go back and restudy the foundations. One of the things I love doing with my students, and I tell on this channel all the time too, that like I'm so excited to learn with my students, because as I reteach the information I was given so graciously, I relearn that information, and I have to relearn it in a more global way or a more pinpointed way, and it's so exciting to go back and go, oh, I never understood that before until now, because now I have to learn it again. So one of the things that I think imposter syndrome has definitely hindered my progress, and if I could go back and give advice to my younger self, it would be to tell myself, like, and I actually heard this from one of the people that mentors me, Sunny Lenarduzzi. I'll kind of link her in the platform below. She just made a video about advice that she would give to her younger self, and I was listening to this and I was like, that's great advice. And one of the pieces of advice that she would give herself is, what the hell is the hurry? There is no hurry, and I completely agree with her in that there's no hurry, there's no rush to learn this medicine. I've always felt like I'm in this like marathon race and I'm 2 leagues behind the front runner. You know, I'm always feeling like I have to catch up, either because of my language skills or my comprehension skills or my inability to digest the material fast enough, or my memorization. I have horrible memorization. You know, and I think Sunny is so correct when she says that there's no rush. I mean, the beauty of acupuncture is that we can learn this medicine until we're 80, 90 years old and continue to help people with it. I think having more positive self-talk from the beginning, and really working even more than I did on the internal and the emotional. So my teacher, Yoko the Kampu Sensei, my teacher's teacher really, talks often about creating yourself and making yourself not only a boat, a vessel to hold your client, but also a placid lake to help ship your client from the shores of unhealth to the shores of health. Because you need to be placid in order to accurately reflect back their image, so that way they can see what their lifestyle has done to them, what really they need to fix. And I think that's a really beautiful way of putting this ultimate goal of self-reflection, self-actualization, and just having compassion for your patients. And you can never do enough of this work, I think, you know, and working on the breath. I think really until quite recently, I understood the breath, but I never really understood how shallow my own personal breath was, you know. Like working on just breathing while you're treating, and breathing deeply and fully, and opening up that space in yourself as you treat to be present with your client every single time. I mean, you can never do too much of this work. I really think it's a ongoing process for the rest of our lives to just be at peace internally. And I think that internal peace reflects onto the client. You know, and I think when you have imposter syndrome like I do, it can be really hard to hold that peace because you're so busy tearing yourself down and saying how poor of a job that you've done. But really, at the core of that, at least for me, at the core of that is a restless spirit, and a spirit that's not fully being breathed into. Like my breath is not fully enlivening my spirit, I think. Well, I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. So, but yeah, so it's, imposter syndrome is hard. Um, and I think it's an important topic, as I said in the beginning. It's something that is not covered a lot in our industry, and is really important for us as an industry to elevate and support and cheer on our fellow acupuncturists in their mental, physical, spiritual journeys, as we cheer on our own, and as a community, really come together, and rather than trying to compete as a business with the acupuncturist on the floor below you or on the street down from you, to embrace them and see them as another arm. As a mom of 4, I constantly joke that I wish I had an arm sprouted out of my back. If I could just have one more arm. And I kind of see my students, and my fellow acupuncturists in Yashinomichi, even those who I just go out and have coffee with, I see them as an extension of not myself, but extension of the healing art that we all practice, and that arm, that branch of the healing art might be different than how I conceptualize and create, but their art is just as fabulous, and there is a patient out there that needs their art and will heal from their art. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. But like, as an industry, we are so blessed with what we have. This art of acupuncture and moxibustion, whether it's Japanese, TCM, Chinese, Korean, is absolutely amazing and is life-changing for our clients, and I dare say life-changing for us as practitioners. So if you're out there listening and you resonate with this, if you have even a little bit of imposter syndrome, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how you've dealt with it, how you've overcome, how you've become stronger through it. As Yokota Kampu Sensei always says, our strengths, our battles, our trauma, our sickness, it's what makes us stronger. It makes us more compassionate as practitioners. I was listening to a video by Mustang Maddie, and I'll link it in the description box below as well. And Mustang Maddie was talking about compassion versus empathy. And she was talking about empathy is seeing a plant that is sick, that is perhaps wilting, and going, oh, plant, that's hard, man. I've been there. That's really hard. It sucks that you need more sunshine. I've been there. Compassion is picking up the plant and going and putting it in the sun. And I thought that was a really simplistic and a beautiful way of spelling out those differences. Whether it's when we work on animals or when we work on people or when we work on ourselves, just having the compassion to take the steps to do what we need to do. And if you're like me and you have imposter syndrome, is, pushing yourself every day to not only prove to yourself that self-talk is not real, but also when you have that self-talk to just stop for a second and say, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm talking to myself bad. I don't know if that's true, but I'm gonna sit with it and recognize it, and I'm gonna move on instead of dwelling on it. Having compassion for yourself to really make the mental, spiritual, and physical choices that make you a better practitioner, a better human being, and generally happier, I think is really the best choice for us as a planet, as a species. And as one community. I mean, that becomes, sorry, it's become very esoteric, this conversation, but I just thought it was one to be had, because I've run into it a lot in both my students in ShinKyu University and also my students just who are still in school. And one that's really not covered enough, I don't think, or talked about enough. I would really love, again, to hear if you have dealt with something similar. If you want to put it in the comments below or reach out to me personally, I'd love to hear from you. Because I think just as a community, starting this conversation and having this conversation will make us all stronger. If you enjoyed this conversation, I highly suggest that you like, subscribe, hit that little bell to be notified of new videos I put out about traditional Japanese medicine every week. As I said, it's my mission to really bridge the gap between TCM and Japanese acupuncture, to elevate all of our practices and create more efficient and better learners out of the acupuncturists across the world. If you're interested in having more conversations like this and really elevating your practice, I would love to talk to you about joining ShinKyu University. And finally, if you're interested in having more inspirational talks about what this medicine can be, what this medicine can do, I highly suggest you checking out this video somewhere over here, which is a recent interview I did with Patty Pullman, who runs Jing Japanese Acupuncture. She is a beautiful practitioner, very talented, and super inspirational. It's a great conversation, so I highly suggest you check that video out, and I will see you in the next one.